it wasn't technology that pulled us apart. It was me thinking that I had to be this version of who I was. What I found with my younger clients is it's not any different because there's still people pleasing or they're still creating themselves into this version of what people want. I was the one that said we need to get a divorce. This isn't working for me and I don't think we're going to grow together anymore. And I knew I was asking for support from him and he was shutting it down. So I was like, well, you're not open to it, so I can step out of this relationship.
Ideas shape people, people shape culture, culture shapes society. But most people never examine the ideas. iNTv is a conversation about the assumptions beneath modern life, where psychology, philosophy, culture, politics, and relationships meet. The name is inspired by the Myers-Briggs personality framework. I'm Damien, here with my co-host Josh. We're both INTPs, and this space is dedicated to thinking things through fully. Welcome to INTV.
Welcome, welcome. Today we have with us Catherine Crestani, an Australian speech pathologist, businesswoman, and author who hosts the Willow Healing Matters podcast. Alongside her work as an intuitive and inner authority guide, she spends years observing how people communicate, attach, and even often override what they know to be true in order to maintain connection. So these patterns became the foundation for her latest book, My Virtual Obsession, which is a psychological novel that explores how loneliness, emotional vulnerability, and modern connection can blur the line between what feels real and what actually is. And then throughout her transformational journey, Catherine emphasizes the significance of self-discovery, authenticity, and empowering others to find their highest potential while navigating complexities of healing and personal growth. So with that all being said, welcome, Catherine Crestani.
Thank you, Damien and Josh. I'm excited to have this conversation with you guys.
Excellent. With everything you've written, I wanted to kind of know what kind of drew you to this topic.
The universe, God, I don't know. So I truly a believer that when something keeps popping up in front of you, then maybe you're meant to be doing something about it, right? So for anyone feeling lost or doesn't know, what is the big problems that keep coming to you? So the novel itself, when I started writing, it came to me in a dream. And then I was like, I need to write this. And as I started to write it, I actually realized it was reflective of the clients that were coming to me. And I was like, oh, wow, like this is really interesting. And what ended up becoming clearer was, how much we lie to ourselves to stay in relationships or how much we pretend everything's okay when it's not. And even through my journey with my kind of my career and also learning to choose myself, stepping away from my first marriage, all those things, I had to learn how to find myself all in that and stop lying to myself. So it was through all these things and all my clients, they kind of started reflecting back what was happening. So even when I was working as a speech therapist, I was working primarily with children, but I still was working with the parents. And the parents were my main concern because they'd come in and they would be like, oh, everything's okay. And I'm like, no, you're not okay. Like you're about to drop. Because having a child with high needs, I worked with a lot of children with autism spectrum disorder. They didn't get a break. It was nonstop. I had clients that they couldn't even sleep. They had to take shifts sleeping because the kids figured out how to unlock the door. No matter where they hit the key, they would somehow get out of the house. So it was a genuine safety concern. So you've got these extremes of life, but at the same time, they kept lying and saying everything was okay. And you can only do that for so long before everything starts to fall apart, right? I think we've all been through that point where either our relationships fall apart, your businesses fall apart, your health falls apart, something will just fall apart at that point because you just become disconnected with yourself so much and you get to numb.
And so your focus in this is a lot of it is through relationship.
Yeah.
So what are the trends that you've been seeing specifically in relationships with these cases that you've been encountering?
A lot of the time people get stuck in the dream of what could be. So, my example that I give is when we marry somebody and we're on the altar, if you do the big church wedding, you're saying, I do. You don't sit there and then visualize 5 years from now having a divorce, right? Or your
Right.
relationship falling apart or something happening. And this is the same even when you go into a relationship. You don't sit there. You're optimistic and you're hopeful and you're like, oh, maybe this person, we could spend long time together. And then we get so stuck in this dream of what could be that we miss everything right in front of our faces. So we end up dismissing our intuition. We end up pushing aside all those signs. And a lot of the clients that I attract are actually at the ends of their relationships, not because that's what I encourage people to do, but often they just need the support to step out of what they've put themselves in and know that it doesn't work for them anymore. And I feel there's this aspect too where we've been so conditioned that a relationship ending is a failure, especially divorce. Like people make it out it's like a really big thing. I know when I went through my divorce, I lost so many friends. It was like they thought they could catch divorce. Like they, but what it really was it was a reflection of the insecurities they had about their relationship. And because I'd stepped out of mine, it made them start to question what was happening in theirs. So a lot of the time, what's happening in relationships is, we go in and we have these false perceptions rather than actually being present. We're already predicting how the relationship will go. And then we miss that connection that we really need to make with that person. Or we've been in the relationship so long and everyone's allowed to grow and change because that's part of being human, right? We grow, we
Right.
change, we learn. But sometimes people don't grow together. And
Right.
that's
I
okay
get that.
too. Yeah. And instead we grow apart. And this is where people get stuck in that and feel like, but this is what our life was meant to look like. But that's not what was happening in that moment.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I understand. So I'm trying to think, well, what can people, what are people missing kind of going into that? What, what kind of preparation or what kind of thought process should they be entering the relationship with? Because I want to know, do you think that we're getting that? Is that available to us? Or is it just this is an issue that's affecting everybody similarly?
I think the biggest thing is that, a lot of us get stuck in that what could be rather than actually being present in the moment. And we're so conditioned in our society to keep thinking about the next goal or the next thing rather than just taking a breath and going, actually, there's a person right in front of me. Then we have this other aspect of technology creeping in. And I can't tell you how many people will ask me, why haven't they texted back yet? Or why didn't they read my DM? Or why? And I was like, well, they're probably busy. I was like, I grew up in the age where if someone rang the home phone and you weren't home, it was okay. You just went home. It wasn't like
Right.
everyone tracked you down. So there's this kind of like everything has to happen now culture rather than just slowing down and being present and actually having conversations and listening. So often we will enter into a conversation and instead of practicing active listening where we're listening to the person and not waiting for responding, we're actually taking in what they're saying. We're already activating what we want to say back. And then we miss the
Right.
emotions or we miss what is happening. So this is this, tricky part that we're in where we need to just learn to be present and slow down again. And if you can, go on a date without taking the phones because it still amazes me when I go out to a restaurant with my family and there's people on dates, but they're both on their phones and not even talking to each other. It still blows my mind. So, we can do these simple steps of like, actually, I'm going to start this relationship and I'm choosing to listen to that person and truly learn about them and learn what they value and learn what they're excited about. And if it matches what I value and what I'm excited about, then yeah, we're going to have a great time together and we're going to see where that goes. We're not going to project too far. It's not like you can't dream, but at the same
Right.
time, you're still going to anchor in what's in front of you as well.
That's fair.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think
Now,
awareness
okay,
is really
Josh, you go
key.
ahead.
All right, yeah, I just think awareness is really
Yes.
key to be aware of just who you are, what you really believe, what you really care about, and then like you said, your dreams, your hopes, your fears, what you're ready for in the future. And then when you're in that moment with somebody else, not letting technology or any other random thoughts get in the way of that connection. Like, what does a healthy individual really look like? How can you become more self-aware?
Date yourself. I know that sounds so weird.
Mm.
But a lot of people can't take themselves on a date. I used to do it all the time. And even when I had my son, my husband and I would take turns just going out by ourselves, because if you're a parent, I fully resonate with the need to just have some adult alone time when you're not thinking about a child. So, can you take yourselves to the movie? Can you go out and go to a cafe and just enjoy your company? Because a lot of the time, there's this big pandemic that the WHO organization talks about of loneliness, this pandemic of loneliness. There's nothing wrong with being lonely. It's when we avoid ourselves when we're lonely. That is where we get into these difficult relationships, or where we settle for something that we wouldn't normally, or where we get sucked into something that's not ours. And the more you get to know yourself and love yourself, and it sounds so cliche again, but unconditional love, like, hey, I love the part of me that likes to self-sabotage right when I'm at the point of doing something, accomplishing something, right? I love the part of me that tells me how terrible I am at making cakes, whatever it might be. You know, just embracing those parts of you and learning that they're part of you, and you can accept that, then you're going to pull into your field, because we're talking about energetics here, right? Like, and you pull into your field then people who are going to love and respect you for exactly who you are, because you have that to start with, and you're not looking for it outside yourself. And this is where we fall into that trap. It's like the loneliness pulls out our vulnerabilities, and most of the time we'll run away from those instead of facing them.
So, so do you think that this is a newer problem, or is this because the way that you're kind of explaining it is, it sounds like maybe technology has exacerbated it in some way, but is it something that's lingering over from before still?
Yeah, I've been through all aspects of this. So like I married my high school sweetheart kind of thing, and I don't recommend to people to get married young, because you have no idea, you haven't experienced life yet, but at the same time, if you go through that, you can grow together. But it wasn't technology that pulled us apart. It was me thinking that I had to be this version of who I was. So this problem for him, which he never asked me to do, I just started giving up parts of myself because I thought that's how I could fit into a relationship. So technology wasn't as big thing back then. Like I had like a Nokia brick phone, like all those kind of things, right? The iPhones I don't think were even existent, but then we get to the point now where what I found with my younger clients is it's not any different, because there's still people pleasing, or they're still creating themselves into this version of what people want. The thing is with technologies, you can hide that a lot more, right? So people will put up a profile of what they want people to see. A lot of people will then go investigate people they might be going to go on a date with. And instead of, having that conversation with them, they'll assume that they know them because they looked at their social media profiles. And I'm like, well, your social media profiles are a snapshot. They're not who you are. So, but then if you put that to the side, and actually have that conversation and that connection, then it's going to be a lot more powerful. So I don't feel it's a new problem. I feel like it's just been exacerbated by adding in the technology. I met my husband now on a dating app. I'm not against any of those things. Where you find the connection, you find a connection. But at the same time, are you being truly yourself, or are you hiding away aspects of you? Because that is where the problem is going to be.
Yeah, I'm just kind of curious about the maturity levels of people getting together and trying to be cooperative within a relationship. Because I'm taking a step back and I'm thinking about where we are in this generation, and I'm thinking about people wanting to be the true authentic version of themselves. And when they come to a relationship, sometimes I think about that in a positive way, but I also think that that could come to the surface in a negative way, in the sense that it's almost like I don't want any criticism for anything about me or something like that. So I'm just trying to think about what level of maturity should I bring to a relationship, so that will create a healthy relationship with somebody else.
Well, it's about being curious, not judgmental, right? That was off Ted Lasso. I love that quote. Be curious, not judgmental. And this is where it's so interesting you bring up levels of emotional maturity, because I have some clients and I'm like, okay, well, this person that you're pursuing currently is like the kindergarten equivalent of emotional maturity, and you're in grade 3. How do you feel that's going to go for you? And they're like, And then the next week they're like, oh, I've met someone else. I said, oh, amazing. Well, they're grade 6 and you're grade 3. So now you know how that feels like. I said, so now you guys have to meet, well, not meet, but you can catch up to them. And sometimes we do attract people that we're further ahead or a little bit behind, but it's about being open and curious and not defaulting into that ego sense where we have to defend everything, right? We have to always be right, because sometimes it's not about being right or wrong. It's actually finding a ground in the middle. And I know for me, I'm not going to lie, I have ups and downs in my marriage where, like things like the other day, I said to my husband, why can't you just refill the soda bottle, like the soda stream kind of thing? Why do I always have to do it? Why can't you do it and leave it in the fridge for me? And then he went and spiraled in this whole other direction. And I was like, actually, this is me telling you, I just want a little bit of help when it comes to these things, or a little bit of consideration. It's not me picking on you for that particular task. So, and it's funny because if you're exhausted and you're tired, you're going to sit there and be, he has this habit too, and he doesn't know why he does it. I've asked him so many times. He'll always leave one thing in the sink. So he'll wash up all the big things, put everything in the dishwasher, and just leave one thing. And I said to him, why do you do that? It drives me nuts. Why can't you just put that last thing in the dishwasher? So when I'm in a good mood, or when I'm happy and awake and I've slept a lot, then I'll sit there and go, oh my goodness, typical hubby, he's just done this, so funny. If I am tired and exhausted, oh my gosh, why can't he just put this last thing in the sink? But learning that about yourself and knowing those are your levels of reaction, I am not going to go talk to him in that exhausted mind state, because I'm going to make a mountain out of a molehill. So this is where,
Gotcha.
again, learning yourself and learning your triggers helps you with your emotional mastery. And this is part of why we're here. Part of being human. Being human means that we learn to master our emotions. And it is a tough school to go through, because you think you've got it and then something else comes up, or you get triggered. Or I don't use triggers as a chance to run away and hide. I look at them as like, all right, what is this teaching me? And I know there's that saying, instead of saying, why is this happening to me? We say, why is it happening for me? And by shifting that, you've pulled yourself out of victim mindset. You've put yourself into more curious mindset. And then you start to ask deeper questions and get to know yourself more, so you can shift through. So when you're in that relationship scenario, you're both going to be at different levels. But if you keep wanting to win every fight, I can tell you right now, you are going to end up losing, because that need to win or be competitive, or it's not going to help you move forward. You have to find that win-win-win scenario where everybody wins, or everyone can have that discussion, and also to get to that level where you can truly express how you're feeling without being afraid of being shut down.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And it definitely seems like the more understanding you have of yourself, the more you can fully have space for the other person to see what their fears are, what is causing them to respond that way. And in that process of kind of building that bond, building that relationship, and then growing together, it seems like it's really important to have a practice, even daily, to have that kind of self reflection. Is that something you do with writing, or how did you get into that?
Oh, lots of different avenues. So I'm a trial by fire person. So I like to say I like to let off bombs in my life. So I get to a point and I realize I'm not okay and I blow up my life. I don't encourage people to do that, but you need some courage sometimes. So like when I realized how much I departed from myself in my first marriage, I was the one that said we need to get a divorce. This isn't working for me, and I don't think we're going to grow together anymore. And I knew I was asking for support from him and he was shutting it down. So I was like, well, you're not open to it, so I can step out of this relationship. And then my business partnership, when that collapsed, again, I was like, nope, not putting up with this. I'm going to separate from this. When my business wasn't working for anymore, I sold my business, but I had to go through a big, big kind of trial point to get rid of that, because when you build a business from the ground up, it's your baby. So I have these life skills, but then I had a coach for a while who taught me how to journal to go a bit deeper in. But I use journaling as a way and writing as a way to start to ask myself questions. I have conversations with myself through writing. It's the funniest experience. So at the start of the year, I just wasn't having many clients and I didn't know why. So I just wrote to myself, why don't I have any clients? And I wrote back, I don't want any. And it ended up being true because in that moment, I didn't want any. I had so much going on in my life. I still had clients. I didn't want any new ones. I had my podcast going. I was releasing my book. There was so much happening that if I added more clients to that, I would have burnt out and tipped over the edge. So sometimes, when you're really honest with yourself, you get funny responses back. But at the same time, you're curious about why that is. And then we've got all these really cool, if you like, woo practices, but like we've got astrology and we've got numerology and we've got human design and we've got gene keys and we have all these things. But what they are, they're just tools for you to learn about yourself. They're tools for you to learn, okay, when something's not in alignment, I get really frustrated. And that is my sign that something's not going right in my life right now. That's for me personally. Whereas my son and my husband, they get really bitter. So I know if they're acting really bitter, they feel really crap about something. They're just not telling me what's going on. I'm like, ooh, what are you bitter about? Like, what isn't feeling alignment? But they're all tools to get to know. They're not there to go, oh, I'm a Cancer sun, Cancer moon. That's why I act this way. They're there to go, okay, these are the aspects of me that make me me. And I'm going to learn how to embrace them and show up authentically as me rather than putting all these masks on and hiding myself. And that is the emotional maturity in itself, right? And that takes courage and that takes effort to back yourself rather than relying on what everyone else is telling you to do. Because sometimes you'll make the crazy decisions like quitting your job where there's nowhere to go because it feels right and you really need to do it, even though everyone else is telling you you're crazy to do that. And you just have to take the leap sometimes and trust you're going to catch yourself, and
Yeah.
then you'll get that backup. And I've never met a single person that once they back themselves that have not landed on their feet. Because when they choose themselves, truly do, and see where they want to go in life, whether it's stepping out of a relationship, stepping out of a career, pursuing that passion finally, quitting that role that doesn't bring them joy or excitement or
Right.
just is draining their energy, then miracles happen. And I kid you not, like crazy miracles. I could tell you so many, but the main one that's popping in my head is I had a client and she was volunteering for this organization. She said, it's just so draining. I said, well, why are you doing it anymore? She's like, I don't actually know. I said, well, what, do you have to? She goes, no, I can resign. And as we were in the coaching session, she actually resigned, sent the resignation letter. The next week, she was approached by somebody to start her dream business, like within a week. And she actually went, oh, I wasn't getting all my energy sucked up there. And this is when you start to focus on yourself and what brings you joy and what you're curious about and follow that. That is when things start to align, and in relationships as well.
Yeah, I mean, and I think those are wonderful things, right? And as you're talking and you're talking about your business and the things that drive you and make you want to keep going forward, um, and my mind is popping up about um, gender roles and how things have evolved over time, right? Because we talk about loneliness and we talk about how things are today, and I wonder how much like the evolution of how gender roles have shifted a bit. I mean, I'm not sure about your culture because I don't know if anybody doesn't know you from Australia. I don't I don't know exactly how it's working over there, or not just always the culture, but it's people have their own flavors for you know traditional roles or not. And so, how do you perceive or how do you see the role of gender and the evolution of that through time? How is that affecting relationships?
I feel this again comes back to knowing yourself, right? And knowing where you show up. It doesn't matter the sexual orientation or whatever. There's always a feminine and a masculine energy in whatever it is. And I've read lots of studies about this and things like that. But the interesting thing is when my son was born, my husband was working and I was still running my businesses. And it got to a point where I went, actually, I think I need to go back to work because what I can earn in 2 days, it took my husband over a week to earn, if he was lucky, kind of thing. And when he decided to be stay-at-home dad, everyone kept asking him when he was going to go back to work. Everybody. And like, he's like, but I don't need to. Like, that was the decision we made in our balance. And they're like, oh, when's she going to come home and look after her child? So that stigma is still here. And for us, we sat down and I've talked to other people about this, and the couples that are growing together, they sit down and they go, all right, which one makes more sense for us to go back to work? I got to a point where I was so burnt out doing my job that my husband's like, I'm like, I can't do this anymore. You need to go back to work now. I actually want to be the stay-at-home parent and do my other things. So still doing my businesses and everything like that. But he's like, no, that's fine. Let's swap. But it's that we had that discussion, right? We had that talk because that things had shifted, and he could see, he goes, no, you've been carrying this family for a long time. You need to have a break. I'm like, I do. I'm exhausted. I need to have a break. Whereas other people go in and they think, well, this is what it has to look like. Or there's still that stereotypical thing that the mum should stay at home and the dad should go to work. Or for
Right.
same-sex couples, it might be, but then we have these other pressures of society where both parents have to go to work, and both parents don't like that. And because we've been conditioned that this is what our life should look like. So then I would talk to these clients and I'll say, well, do you have to live in that house? Do you have to live in that neighborhood? Can you move somewhere and have less of a mortgage so one of you can work less, because you're clearly missing your kids? They're in daycare or whatever all the time. And it's when you actually present those possibilities that it allows you to possibly step out of that. So I feel, you have those discussions as a couple. You don't need to worry about what everyone else is telling you. You do what you feel is right for you, and you create your life, not what everyone else is dictating to you. And this is where we can fall into the trap of letting the noise confuse us from what we actually want in our lives. We're not the typical family. We have one car that we share because we're like, we don't need two cars, and we needed some cash at the time. So we sold the other car. Before I stayed home, it was my husband that was at home. We live in a house where it's not normal. Like, we live in a 3-bedroom in the middle of the bush, but we're like, no, we don't want to do that anymore. We want to move into a tiny home. We want to change our lifestyle. So this is where
Okay.
other people might say that that's crazy, but for us that aligns. Whereas
Like,
for
works for you.
Exactly. And even I have clients and I'm like, if you want to live on a shack in the beach, then go ahead and live on the shack in the beach. Who cares if you're earning more than what that's dictating? But if that makes you happy, go do that. You don't, just be happy you've got this big savings account, maybe put in an investment property if you really want to. But at the same time, if that shack on the beach feels like home to you and brings you happiness and peace and joy, live on the shack on the beach. It's perfectly okay.
Yeah.
I love that. That makes a lot of good sense. And it's really cool that you're able to kind of counsel people to follow the thing that makes them happy, follow their values so they can kind of live more in alignment with the life that they want, the kind of person they want to be, and the kind of people they want to be around. Now, you mentioned a couple of times that you've had a couple crises kind of that caused you to reassess your direction. Now, do you think you have to go through a crisis, or is there other ways to kind of do some reflection to navigate that? And do you think even AI could help you with like asking some of those questions?
Yes. Okay. First of all, AI does not replace human interactions. Use it for some level of guidance. But if you need to go deeper, go find a human. That would be my recommendation with that. But you don't always have to go through a crisis. The crises happen when you've ignored yourself for so long that I truly believe then the universe goes, this is going to come back on you now because you've just been pushing this away and pushing this away and pushing this away. We need to turn this up. And a lot of the time, people have to go through that breakdown before they go through a breakthrough. And what that means is, as we kind of level up our life, things have to fall away in order for us to step into that next thing. So, in physics, energy is not created or destroyed; it's only transferred. So, if you're holding on to these old relationships and not letting them go, but it's stopping you from moving to where you want to go, something has to happen, right? And that is where the crises can happen. Whereas if you say, actually, I don't fit with that circle of friends anymore. Every time I go out with them, I feel really drained and disappointed, and I don't want to
Right.
participate in the conversations. Like I actually see their name on my phone and I go, don't answer the call. I'm letting you know it's okay. So at the same time, if you come to that conclusion on your own, it's going to be a nicer transition. But if you don't, I can tell you right now, something's going to happen. They're going to betray you. It's going to feel like this little trauma or a big trauma, whatever it might be. And you're going to go into crises because you could see that needed to happen, but you didn't quite have enough courage to do that in the moment. So sometimes our hand can be forced like that. And it's the same even I found with business. I needed to let my company go, but I was refusing to. So and I can't even make this story up. So in the space of 3 months, in the first month, I had 3 staff resign in a week. And they're really hard to find allied health practitioners in Australia, like good ones anyway. So at that point, I'd actually made the decision I needed to step back from the business. I wanted to just go into more of a managerial role. I wanted to look after my health, all those things. So when I had 3 staff resign in a week, I was in a ball on the floor crying because I'm like, I can't do this. I can't, like, how am I going to find these staff? And anyway, I got back up. I'm here talking to you. So clearly I got off the floor. And then a month later, in the space of a week, another 3 staff resigned and I still hadn't
Wow.
replaced the first 3, right?
Wow.
So I'm like really angry by this point. I'm like, oh my goodness, what do you want from me, universe? Because I kind of stepped more into my spiritual gifts at that point. I'm like, what do you want? I'm like, this is so annoying. And then a month later, in the space of a week, another 3 staff resigned. I will tell you, they were all for unique reasons. None of them knew the other ones resigning, and they
Wow.
all had different reasons for leaving. But by this point, that I had the last 3 leave, I went, you know what? These people aren't meant to be in my life anymore, and I don't want to run this company anymore. I'm either going to sell it or I'm shutting the doors before the lease is renewed. Like, that's the point I got to. But I had to go through these crises because I couldn't, that's the shove I needed to get to that point. And it was definitely the right choice for me because I needed to go through that in my life. But if I probably listened to my husband a few months earlier, where he's like, you're not happy, you need to sell the business. I probably should have stepped in then, but I wasn't ready. And I understand for anyone who's grown a business from scratch, sometimes we have to get to the point where we're ready to let it go rather than someone else telling us to let it go. Yeah.
I'm interested in your book, My Virtual Obsessions, because, it seems like it ties into these themes that you're talking about right now, but can you just explain it a bit?
So Clive is our kind of, I guess, our hero in the story, but he's sick of dating. And his friend buys him a virtual reality dating app, and you put on the goggles and you're in this virtual dating world. He thinks it's all pretend, and then weird things start to happen in his life and things start to fall apart, but he was ignoring all the red flags even before that. Like, even when he was signing into the program, he's like, this doesn't feel right. Like, there was lots of flags that were popping up for him, and he kept discounting his intuition, his gut instinct. He kept putting it to the side. And then it got to the point of crazy stalker level, and all these crazy things happened. But then the second part of the book, we actually flipped to Anna, who is our avatar, if you will, or the person in the dating. He was thought virtual dating. And she straight away, because she'd been so lonely and looking for this right person in her life to support her, and he met all the boxes. So all of a sudden, she's gone into this full-on obsession that he is the one for me. And he is the one that is going to allow my life to be exactly how I want it to look, as based on paper. I'm ticking all the boxes. This is what I need in my life. So her loneliness led her to becoming obsessed and going to crazy stalker mode with like all these cool hacking skills and everything like that. But she hid herself behind technology. She fudged some things on her profile. Like, she pretended she liked things that she didn't, because again, she wanted to fit into this narrative of what she created in her head, even though it wasn't really who she was in real life. And in the meantime, Clive had met someone in real life that he never expected, that was, his match, who was, the one. And then she got really jealous over that too. So this is where sometimes we get stuck in these fantasies and we get stuck in the dreams of what we create for ourselves, even when all those red flags are coming up. So even for Clive, when he was going through this virtual dating thing, he's like, "Ugh, this doesn't feel right, but I'm just going to do it because I'd rather do that than drink a bottle of whiskey because I'm lonely." So that kind of aspect of that. So it makes people reflect on their lives, like, okay, where have I actually made up what is happening rather than accepting what's right in front of me? Or where in my life have I, stepped into these false impressions and maybe become a little bit obsessed. I have clients that do become obsessed with people. They're like, why haven't they done this? Or why haven't they wrote back? And I'm like, it's been a day. Like, people are busy. It's
Right.
okay. They don't have to reply straight away. I have friends and our message replies are sometimes a week apart because we're busy mums and we'll see it and we forget to reply. We genuinely forget, so it's, and I don't go, oh my gosh, they mustn't want to be friends with me anymore because they haven't replied straight away, because I know that I understand that that's where we're at. And that's,
Right.
again, that emotional maturity that we were talking about earlier. But the book just allows people to go deeper into that and question, hey, maybe I did become a little bit of a stalker when I dove into my ex's profile to see everything he was doing in his life right now rather than letting it go, or maybe I did become a little bit obsessed when I had this date with this person and then I looked up his LinkedIn and then I want to know everything about him. It doesn't matter how it looks. It's just allowing yourself to, first of all, forgive yourself for doing that. Sometimes we do get curious and we go in these rabbit hole adventures that go, oh my goodness, how did I get into this stalker mode? But
Right.
at the same time, don't let loneliness be the reason that you say yes to things that don't feel right.
It's fair. I like that, where
That's
you
fair.
can
Don't
actually
want to
go
be
look
desperate.
around and actually not let loneliness be the reason to cause yourself to settle, to justify all these terrible things you do. And like the idea of not looking to other people to satisfy that thing in you, to be the one person in your life who's going to make everything all right. Like, how do you help someone navigate getting their agency back, getting their power back, and actively like building the skill of courage like daily instead of waiting to feel ready?
Sometimes a lot of my clients, which sounds really sad, they've forgotten how to dream and like create a new dream for themselves. So sometimes we have to peel it back and actually get through all the hurt and the pain and the feelings of not being good enough or whatever it might be, and come back to, all right, if you could show up authentically as Josh or authentically as Damien and you could do anything in the world, what would that be? And if they can answer that simple question, then we can figure out how to work around backwards from that. So I'll use like visualizations and meditations and things like that to help them anchor that back in. Because when we lose the hope or the idea of what could be in our lives, then it makes it really hard to keep going. I had a client, and when we started, she literally couldn't get out of bed because her nervous system was so fried. She was definitely in that freeze state, but she could not move out of bed because the world felt too much. And now she's at this other end where she just happily observes people in her life blowing up things. And she goes, huh, I used to be like that and everything affected me. I was like, yeah, look how far you've come. But at the same time, you have to back yourself and let yourself follow that joy. If you don't have something in your life, whether it's a hobby or maybe hopefully it's your day job, because that would be amazing, but that lights you up and makes you excited and makes you want to jump out of bed in the morning, then you're not living. You're just moving through the motions of life. We need that joy and that passion, however that looks. It might be cooking for your family. That's fine. It might be, creating a podcast. It might be painting. It might be, I used to create mixtapes. I don't know. You can't really do that anymore. Maybe create a playlist and you share it with your friends. I don't know. Whatever it is, allow yourself to have that joy and then keep following that, because that's our soul, our heart telling us this is the next step for you. Follow that curiosity and follow that joy. And if something keeps coming in your field, like a person keeps mentioning the same thing again and again and again, and you keep hearing it, and I'm talking about, you might be at a cafe and you overhear a conversation and that's what you hear. You're in the radio and then something pops up on, or listen to a podcast and that's what you hear. You know, that is the universe telling you, why don't you go look into that? It keeps coming up, go pay attention to that and go look into that. And that is about being curious and asking, ooh, Why is this happening? You know, it's like we watched Kung Fu Panda the other day as a movie, and he goes, there are no accidents. There are no accidents. You know, everything is there to help you to find your way to the next thing. So, in terms of having a list, simply just find that moment in your day that makes you joy, brings you joy, or you're curious about, and start to create little chunks of time where you do that. And the more you can do that, if you can turn that into your career, you're going to not work a day in your life. It'd be amazing.
Yeah, that's the best thing. If you can get paid to do the thing that brings you joy, that's a great thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So I know we're getting close on time, but we would definitely want to give you some space to tell everybody where they can find your book and find you online.
My website is willowhealing.org. You can go there and you can find everything, or glimpses of me, if you will. And then my book, My Virtual Obsession, you can get it on Amazon or pretty much all ebook reader platforms. It's on Kobo, Apple, all those fun things. And I'm on Instagram a lot. So my handle is willowhealingsh. So you can see some of the different aspects of me on there, and come a little bit into my world. And if you're interested in listening to my podcast, it's Willow Healing Matters, and it's on all the favorite platforms.
Cool. So yeah, we'll put it into the description and everybody go check out Catherine's website, her book, and her own Instagram. Um, you got anything else that you wanted to add, Catherine, at the end? Anything you want to leave the listeners with? A message, something inspiring, or something to help them take the next step?
I feel the biggest thing is learn to back yourself. You know, learn to love yourself and truly bet on yourself, because the more you do that, the more things will come into your life that just feel magical and you can't even explain it. So, and thank you both, Josh and Damien, for having me for this conversation too. Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
It's been our pleasure.